and welcome to the Final Wake Up. I'm your host, Madison Palika, holistic health coach, certified heart math mentor, published author of a #1 Amazon new release, and creator of ebooks and courses that help you become the best you possible. I am passionate about bringing light to a world full of darkness and confusion. After becoming deathly ill, as well as severely anxious, and having doctors give me no solutions, I had to find my own way to health. I was mind blown by the things that I was finding, and I became obsessed with helping other people find health and happiness outside of the system too. I'm here to help you become happy and empowered so that you can also live a life full of meaning. You will love the Final Wake Up if you're ready to dodge the traps that this world has set for you. If you want more, you can head to my Instagram page at madison.palika. Join my club at the link in my bio to be the first one to know about sales, product launches, life updates, and to get early access and discounts. And now, on to today's episode. Okay, hi guys, welcome back to the Final Wake Up. This is Madison Palika, your host here. This is also, if you can notice, the first time that I'm actually recording with a real microphone, if you can believe that. I made it 64 episodes in and never used a real microphone. So, blessing that God has put this into my life. My boyfriend just had an extra random one. And it's also a blessing because it came through my friend Matthew, who we have on the episode today. He is very good at audio and engineering. So he kind of helped me set this whole thing up. He's helping me take strides. And I know Matthew because he has worked with me in my coaching program. So we've kind of just developed like a friendship and got to know each other better. But the reason that I have him on today is so exciting and it's so timely. He actually went to the ASBURY Revival. And I have seen many differing opinions on social media about what's going on there. Some people saying that it's literally satanic, and I want to just preface by saying that I am like almost 3 years into my faith. So I'm a fairly new believer and I don't totally understand exactly what revival is or like what's happened in the history of revivals. So I just want to welcome Matthew on today. He's going to be talking all about his experience and kind of give us the rundown about what revival is. So welcome, Matthew. If you want to just do a little introduction, tell us a little bit about your testimony, and I'll let you take over.
Cool. Well, hey, Maddie. It's great to be here. I'm glad we finally got this figured out. Yeah, my name's Matthew. I've been a Christian most of my life. I'm 20 years old now. And, you know, it's more than just my parents' religion. Like, yeah, I grew up Christian. It was part of the household, right? But I found Jesus myself. Like, I have a personal relationship with him. And so it's always been a huge part of my life. I have a kind of long testimony, so I won't go into the whole thing. But basically, like, I was born with a disability. So that's kind of, that's been a significant part of my faith, just like learning to trust him in that and trust him to use my struggles to his glory and not be angry about that. And then also, like, I've moved all over the place. Like, I was born in Idaho, then lived in the Caribbean, then lived in New Jersey. Now I'm going to college in Nashville. And while I was in the Caribbean, I had to go through some hurricanes, which also was a big like trusting God moment. And now I go to a Christian school and I help lead a small church on campus, and I lead a Bible study and take theology classes. I'm a communication major, so I take a lot of communication classes. And yeah, that's the SparkNotes version of kind of my story. And Jesus is awesome, and I try to live my life for him. So yeah.
Beautiful. And then how old are you?
I'm 20.
20. Okay, cool. Okay, so yeah, with this whole revival thing, it basically blew up on social media one day. I'm seeing it everywhere now, and I see a lot of differing opinions, but I don't know what to think about it because I have never seen a revival. I've never experienced it. So can you just explain a little bit about what revival even is and like what it means?
Sure. So it's like you know, the whole we are dead, and then Christ kills off our old selves basically and resurrects us into a new person. It's like, you know, being born again, that whole concept. It's basically, it's related to that, where it's a resurrection from sin, from old life, from like, you know, resurrecting into God, revival back into living with God. And typically it's on a mass scale. Um, and so, it's happened several times throughout history. Kind of most notably in American history, it's I think in like the 1700s with Jonathan Edwards, like the whole sinners in the hands of an angry God. Now that sermon is kind of controversial today, there is some theological significance to it, and it did spark a significant revival in the people of the U.S. at the time, where people were just turning to God, a bunch of people turning to God, and not just like, service level emotionalism, but actual legitimate like turning around repentance, life change. There's a call to repentance. There's a worshiping God. There's a hunger for God. And so yeah, I definitely saw a good bit of that when I went to Asbury today, or not today, but when I went to Asbury last week.
Okay. And so, yeah, like obviously, I don't think I really put the two together. Like revival, like to be revived, obviously. So would you say it's more of something for believers who have kind of gone lukewarm, or is it something where it's like people who have never known Jesus are suddenly just like called to him and really like right there they repent and they praise? Like how does that
Mhm.
work?
I mean, honestly, it's kind of both. It can apply to both. I don't see why not. Because, when you're not a believer, you're living in sin, you're living in the flesh, and you are, uh, you know, dead in a sense, and you're living on the path to death, which is an Old Testament theology concept, very, very old concept. You're walking the path of death, and Jesus comes in and he resurrects you. Uh, but then also when you're a Christian, you've been born again, you go lukewarm, you're kind of going back onto the path of death. And so you do need if you're lukewarm, a revival will help you get back onto the path of life, back onto God's path. So I mean, it really depends on, like, I guess the people in the revival, like, just it depends on a lot of things, but I would say it totally applies to both.
Cool. And
Yeah.
then, sorry, I literally have so many questions. In a revival, is it usually like stuck, at least like historically? Is
Mhm.
it usually in one location? Does it spread very far? And like what's associated with it? Are there things going on like miracles and signs and wonders? Or is it more just like, oh, the Spirit of God is very heavy and present here?
Sure. I mean, again, it depends a lot. Like, I'm not going to try to define specifically these are the strict criteria for a revival, because that's like, oh, I'm going to put God in a box, and that's never a good idea. So, I mean, yeah, it can accompany all of that. It's whatever God wants to use with it. It could be just a local thing if that local community really needs it, or it could be a widespread thing, like, especially if when it comes to, like technology and stuff, with Jonathan Edwards and his revival, it was, I don't know exactly how far, but it was pretty far within the nation, when however big the US was then, but it didn't exactly reach like global scale. But now with like Asbury, with modern day Asbury, which Asbury actually has a history of revivals, it's really cool. Yeah, okay, I'll back up a little bit. There was like the Jesus Revolution in the 70s, that was a bit of a revival, and that was more widespread than Jonathan Edwards, because he didn't have like TV and radio, and in the 70s that's what they had, so they used it was a bit more widespread. And now we have social media, and we have like, planes and cars and like everything. We can go pretty much anywhere. And so with Asbury, there were people flying in from all over the world, and coming in. And even if they didn't fly it from all over the world, they saw it on social media and were like, whoa, that's really cool. How can God use me here? So yeah, it just depends on a lot of things, and really what God wants to do with it.
And you mentioned a revival in the 70s. I could
Mhm.
be totally wrong, but yeah, have been seeing this on social media. I see some people who are ecstatic about it. I see some people who are questioning it.
Mhm.
And I don't know if you know anything about this, but apparently there is like a movie coming out soon about like I think it's called like Jesus
The
Revolution
Jesus
or something
Revolution.
like
Yes.
that.
Uh-huh.
And so some people are raising these questions of like, is this just like a publicity stunt before this movie comes out?
Mhm.
And I think it's cool
Interesting.
to talk to you because there's some people who really have like these bad ideas about this revival that's happening, like thinking that it's
Uh-huh.
just staged, thinking that it's satanic. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, if it is staged, it's very, very impressively staged, but I really don't think it's staged. As far as Jesus Revolution goes, the movie, I'm I really want to see that movie. It looks really good because the guy whose life it's about, Greg Laurie, I listened to his podcast. I've been following him for years. He is a very solid biblical teacher, very good theology, very good. He's basically like his podcast is like he'll record his sermons and post them, like, and he is really, really good. And his story is really cool. And yeah, I grew up in the 70s, punk, not punk, like hippie, into like all sorts of drug culture and some like, new age stuff. And then Jesus took him and was like, "Nope, you're mine now." And then started this whole like movement in the 70s with him. And he is also featured in the Jesus Music documentary that came out like around a year ago, because he was also in the center of that, and it's kind of the rise of like Christian contemporary music and how that started and how it went from like classic hymns into like what we see today. And so yeah, I really don't think any of those two things are connected. Like I haven't heard uh Greg, the pastor, taught who is who Jesus Revolution is about. I haven't heard him talk about the revival at all. And that's not to say that he hasn't. Maybe he has. I don't know. But like I haven't seen him do it. And yeah, I doubt there's any sort of connection. And it's definitely not satanic. There was like I was there, So I went last Saturday. No, last
Wait,
Sunday.
wait.
I
Before we get into your experience, I have one last
Okay.
question.
Uh-huh.
So, when you're talking about the Jesus Revolution, and it's this
Yeah.
guy who went from really hippie to Jesus saving him,
Mhm.
obviously I relate because I was a hippie and I was in the new age culture.
Mhm.
So, from someone who has no like past background and like history, I don't really understand it. Would you say that what's happening today, like me and all this whole group of a lot of women, but just people in general that are coming out of the new age and the hippie practices and coming to Jesus, is
Mhm.
it just a repeat of what's already happened in the history, like in the 70s, or is it different?
It could be. I mean, I'm not one to say I can't, I don't know the future. But like yeah, it certainly could be. And especially paired with what's happening in Asbury right now. And I know a lot of the criticism I've heard is like, "Oh, is this legitimate or is it just like, emotionalism?" And that's a fair critique. I think being like having a healthy sense of skepticism towards these kinds of things, the Bible tells us to test the spirits, and like that totally fair. As long as you're not being like, cynical and not willing to see the good in it. Yeah, that's totally fair. And is there some emotionalism going on? Yeah, I'm sure there is. Everyone's different. I'm sure there's some people just going there for, the emotional Jesus high, and then they get back and they're back to normal. Um, so it's hard to say right now because it's so early on. Like, is this legitimately like revival or not? Because that it's a long-term change, right? It's them, okay, God, I'm turning to you, I'm saying yes to you. And then God starts the work on you. And he doesn't normally immediately sanctify you and like, okay, now I'm exactly every single thing that I was struggling with, I'm perfect with now. Like, no, it's a long process. And so, we'll see over the coming years if the people who are seeming to turn to Jesus through this through what you've seen with a bunch of people that from the new age, and what I've seen just in my generation. Is it emotionalism? Could be, but there's definitely something deeper than that too.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So, yeah, how and why did you end up going?
Cool. Yeah. So I heard about it like you, just kind of suddenly. I was like, a few of my friends started talking about it and posting about it, and I was like, huh? What is this? Like, it's a revival. Okay, so like, what exactly does it look like? What is happening? So I heard about it. Basically, what happened, for those who aren't familiar, it was so it started. It's this school in Kentucky, this college called Asbury. It's in this small town, and it's a Christian private university. And they had chapels. They have chapel services. My school does that too. And the pastor finished preaching the message, and then students just like normally, chapel's done. All right, students leave, they get their chapel credit, and then they, go to class and whatever. But and most people did that, but there were some that just stayed and prayed and started worshiping, and they just, they said they felt the Holy Spirit telling them, to stay. There was one person where they left the chapel building, and then the Holy Spirit told them, hey, go back and, go back in and experience more of my presence. And so they did, and then it just kind of built from there. And like the school started to notice, and students started talking about it, and then more and more students went in, and then the professors were like, huh, something's happening, people aren't going to classes. And so then,
Oh, wow.
they started to notice things, and then the worship started to go on, and then that's when the word got out for, like, the people outside of the school, oh wow, this revival is happening. And so it's a chapel service that had every intention of ending, that God was like, no, this is gonna keep going.
Not today.
Yeah, and it went gone for like 2 weeks straight. It's insane, 24/7 nonstop. And so I had heard about that on social media through some of my friends, and I was like, whoa, that looks really cool, I really want to go, but like I don't have a car. So I was like, oh, probably not going to be able to go, that sucks. But like, I don't need to go there to experience God, like he's equal for everyone. But I would like to, that'd be really cool. And so yeah, then on last Friday, one of my friends just we were eating lunch together, and he was like, hey, so I'm thinking of going to Asbury over the weekend, you want to come? And I was like, yeah. And so he was like, all right, cool. And then we got a couple other friends who went with us, and we took the drive. It was like 3 hours. And we got there, and yeah, that's how we got there, and why, I wanted to. It looked like fun.
What were your expectations going into it?
I didn't have a ton of expectations because I didn't know a ton about it. I was expecting to encounter God. I was expecting to feel his presence, and I was expecting to be changed. And I intentionally didn't have a like specific expectation for how those things would go.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you had these sort of expectations, and then you actually arrived. Like, tell me how it unfolded, just like your whole experience.
Okay. So it's I want you to picture it's a small school. Small campus. They have lately had, thousands, tens of thousands of people coming. They're not designed for that. It's again small town, right? So it's this, you're driving to the school, and there's like country roads, right? It's hills and farms, and like, house here and there, and you get on campus, and they don't have like a giant parking lot, but there's a bunch of cars. There's cars like parked on the side of the road. There's like a big clearing of grass that they've converted into a parking lot. And so we, go all the way into the back, because there's all the cars that are parked on the side of the road, into the grass field that's the parking lot. And then we walk over into to the, the courtyard where the chapel building is, and there's just like huge line of people all over the place. There's people sitting in the lawn. They have screens set up outside with speakers, so that like people who can't get in, because it's, it's a small building, right? You can't fit 20,000 people in that building. So they have screens outside for people who are waiting, or people who don't want to wait in the line to see what's still going on. There's people outside singing, and they have this long line of people. Luckily, we were able to get in really quickly, because they want to, since this is, it seems like God with this is using using Gen Z, using my generation for this, and is trying to reach us, and is, started by college students. They want this to be like a focus on college students, and so they let priority in for people under 25. And that was a much, much smaller line. So my friends and I got in probably within like 10 minutes. And I can send you some like pictures and videos later that I took, and you can show people here. But yeah, it was incredible. They were like, hey, we got people, we need some people in the choir loft. You guys want to go in? And we're like, yeah. So we like got up on stage, so there's like the main stage, then there's like behind it, there's the choir loft. And so we got in the choir loft, and it was incredible just seeing, like, it was packed. There were so many people. and everyone was just praising Jesus, pouring their hearts out to Jesus. And it was people of all ages from all over the world, tons of diversity. It was mostly people around my age because that's who they were focusing on. But it was, I saw multi-generational all over the place, young and old. It was very cool. People from different countries, different just different regions. And yeah, I entered that building and they were singing, and I was I just felt God's presence like heavier than I felt in a long time. And the cool thing about it was, I don't know how much you've heard of like modern day church with like the seeker sensitive model and mega churches and like trying to appeal, like water down stuff and appeal to everyone and like high production value and all that stuff, right? There really wasn't high production value, which is something I really valued. They had, so when I was up there when it was worship, there was a person singing, there was an acoustic guitar, and there was like a hone that you could barely hear, and like there was a few microphones, and that's it. There wasn't any fancy lights, no like fog machines, none of the like
Yeah.
the high production value like rock concert that you get in a lot of churches nowadays. It wasn't that.
Yeah,
There
one of the
was
guys I listen to, he calls it the smoke machines and skinny jeans.
uh-huh yeah, none of that. And it was like there was a drum kit on stage that was never touched. It was just those three simple instruments up there. And yeah, it was super cool. And then so it would switch between, there were cycles of like worship, then someone would speak, then worship, and it was like 40 minutes of worship, 20-ish minutes of someone speaking. And the pastor would come up or like a professor would come up. At one point, this was really cool. They had someone came up and said, hey, if you're around college age and you have a verse that is just on your heart that you want to share, feel free to come up here and like share what you want to say. And so I had something that I wanted to say, but it was just too there were too many people, so like I just couldn't.
Well, now's
Um,
your chance.
I know, yeah, yeah. I'll get there. I'll get there. There's more. And it very much relates to my testimony. It's one of my favorite verses in the Bible. I want to get it like tattooed on my body, which I know can be kind of controversial, but like well, that's a topic for another day. Um, so anyway, I am up there and just, okay, this is really cool. Bunch of people come up my age and start like reading Bible verses. And then a bit later, someone else comes to speak. And the verse that I wanted to say was 2 Corinthians 12:9, which is, therefore I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses so that Christ's power may rest on me. And that's been really impactful for my life. Just like, having a disability, it's, I have weakness. And so letting God use that weakness and letting his power like be expressed through me, I find a lot of comfort in that verse. And so that's the verse I wanted to share because I feel like a lot of people can also like relate to that. You don't have to be disabled. Everyone has some sort of weakness that they're working with. And like Paul, he had the thorn. And so I wanted to speak about that, but I didn't. But someone else came up and spoke about that exact verse. And like not a student, like an hour later, one of the professors came up and was like, all right, I'm going to preach a mini sermon on this verse. And I was like, whoa, that's the exact verse that I wanted to talk about. That's really cool. And there were also, there was, so I'm an introvert. I love people, but I also need my alone time. I definitely like need a balance, right? I'm ambiverted, but I'm more introverted than I am extroverted. And so I'm going to back up a little bit. So there was that Friday, the church that I help lead, we met for a service, and I was preaching that day. And then what we do is after the preaching is done, we have prayer time and we have fellowship time. And basically we say, okay, everyone who needs prayer, stay here. Everyone who wants to like fellowship and talk and hang out, go over there so that like the prayer people can focus. And normally most people go in fellowship, and there's only like 2 or 3 people that pray. Everyone stayed to pray, and everyone stayed for like a long time. And I usually I don't feel led much to pray for other people, or hadn't in the past. And then like the spirit was really heavy that night, and then told me, hey, go pray for that person. And I was thinking in my head like, okay, is this God or is this just like my thoughts, like what if whatever. And then as I'm thinking that, I'm like, wait a minute, it doesn't matter. It's prayer. Like it's a good thing. They're not going to say no. They're not going to be offended. If it is God, awesome. If it's not God, like we're still commanded to
awesome.
pray for each other anyway. So like, why am I worried? So then I'm like, all right, cool. So I go up and I pray for that person. And then she, after a little while, got up and left. And he was like, okay, now pray for that person over there. And so same thing. And, it was just a really cool time. And so that kind of started the momentum. And then so when I got there, I was standing, I was worshiping.
The prayer experience, that happened the same day that you went to Asbury, or that was like a week before?
That was like 2 days before.
2 days before, okay.
Yeah. So then I went to Asbury, and yeah, I was standing up there worshiping, and there's this girl next to me, and she's sitting down, and I can't tell if she's like praying or just like, singing or whatever. And I again feel the prompting of go pray for her. And I'm like, God, I don't even know her. And he's like, okay, well, I don't care. Go pray for her. Yeah. And I'm like, all right. So yeah, I got next to her and I asked if there's anything she needed prayer for. And we ended up just kind of talking back and forth for the whole time that I was there. Like, I prayed for her, but then we kept like the conversation kind of kept going, and I ended up getting her contact info. She's super cool. We're like connected. We're friends now. And yeah, that was really cool that God used that. And then this was also totally God. So towards the end, we were there for probably like 5-6 hours. Like it was,
Oh, wow.
It was crazy. Yeah, it was. And I didn't want to leave. It was so cool. I only left because I had to. And, I know a lot of Christians, they hear like, oh, the Bible talks about we're going to be worshiping God in heaven. And like, okay, that's kind of cool. But like, wouldn't that get like kind of boring after a while? And I kind of thought that too. And then experiencing just the pure worship that was there of just everybody together, I'm like, no, this is cool. I can't. This doesn't get old. This is like I still want to go back, and I didn't want to leave, but like I had to. And so it was kind of cold. So my friends and I, we brought our jackets, but it's hot in the building because there's a ton of people. We're all moving and singing, and so we put our jackets off to the side of the stage. And so my friend and I were like, all right, let's leave. And my friend, like 30 seconds before that, was thinking, oh, I better not forget my jacket up here. I didn't forget my jacket. I got it. And we both like we get off the stage, we go towards the exit, and like I'm walking towards the exit and I look around and I'm like, oh, my friend's not with me. What the heck? And I turn around and he's like a little bit behind me talking to this girl, and he sees me and he motions for me to come over. I'm like, okay. So I go over, and yeah, this girl, she's like, hey, yeah, I don't know you guys, but you guys were passing me, and I just felt God telling me to pray for you guys. So like, what is it that I can pray for you about? And so, yeah, we told her, and she prayed over us. It was a really good prayer. Julia, if you're listening to this, you're awesome. And and then she left. And then the only reason that happened is because my friend, who 30 seconds before said, I'm not going to forget my jacket, realized he forgot his jacket and turned around and went back towards the stage. If we had remembered our jackets, we would have kept going. We would have never encountered her. But he forgot his jacket and then was reminded right at the moment that she was coming up to us. And then, so that's the only reason that happens. That was 100% God. That was really cool. And yeah, it just really, some of the things I really felt God talking about was, for a long time, I've kind of felt pessimistic about Gen Z overall. Like, yeah, there's those of us who are into Jesus, who are Christians, but like, realistically, there's a lot of us who aren't. We're probably one of the most far away from God generations, like ever, really.
Yeah, it's a sad generation, and like not any of your fault. It's like you have just landed in this horrible spot.
Yeah. And so that's been like discouraging, and I've been a bit pessimistic about that. And like, God, I know that you can do anything, you can work miracles, you can turn all of us around, but like just the way things are going, I don't really see that happening. But I don't really think that anymore, because like I said, most of it was Gen Z, and it was it was so genuine, just people pouring their hearts out to God, people repenting. I've been hearing some stuff online where there wasn't any like calls to repentance, but I mean, I can't speak for the entire 2 weeks, but for the night I was there, yeah, there was a call to repentance and people responded. And how much of that was genuine, how much of that was emotionalism, again, I don't know. I don't know their hearts, but it was still there and God can use it. Through this, God really showed me like, no, he is moving. He is taking back our generation. He is, we can be separated from God, yes, but like through this he's moving, and there's an increased hunger for him, and not just for like for church or like what I like to call churchianity, where you just go to church on Sunday and check the box, but like actually genuinely experiencing him. There's a hunger and it's increasing, and he is moving to meet that, and he's going to snatch us up from the enemy, and we are, I mean, I don't know what he's going to do, but he's going to do something amazing with us. And so I have a lot more hope for our generation now. And like I've felt like also for a lot of my life it's been, wait on God's timing, wait on God's timing. I know you want this, but like, just wait. And it's like, okay, like God knows better than me, I'm going to trust that, but it's also kind of frustrating. It's like, well, God, like let's get something happening, right? And I really feel like the time of, and this could be wrong, I'm not going to claim to speak for God, but after this it really feels like the time of waiting is coming to an end. Like things are starting to change, things are really moving and changing for the better. Things are brighter. I have a lot more hope than I used to, and I wasn't a negative person before. I'm just more hopeful about things, and God is moving. The time of waiting is nearing its end. Things are going to happen, big things, and I'm really excited to see where God takes us and what God does with this, because like it's not just in Asbury anymore. Like Asbury is where it started, but people are coming there and then bringing that back. My school, we had our Monday night chapel, and normally that just normally it's from 6 to 7 and then that's it, right? But chapel ended and then people just kept worshiping, and we would have worshiped the whole night. Like we probably would have spent like the entire night there. Like I was preparing to mentally to like pull an all-nighter, and I know I'm not the only one there. And the only reason we didn't is because they closed the building, they kicked us out. But
well, and I saw on social media too that like I don't know how long this lasted or if it was just the first night when it actually broke out, but like people were reporting like, okay, they're bringing in food, oh my gosh, they're rolling out mattresses, like people are sleeping in the building and like stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. We totally would have done that if they didn't kick us out. And then like we met the next morning, like they were like, all right, well, it opens back up at 8 a.m, so let's all meet here and pray, and we did that. And like again, there was even more of God telling me, okay, go pray for that person, okay, go pray for that person, go pray for that person. It's like, and a few of them were my friends, and a few of them were like God, I don't know her name, I've just seen her around. And he's like, okay, we'll go pray for her anyway. And there were a few people where like God told me to pray for them, and it turns out we're all struggling with a lot of the same, like we have a lot of the same things that we want to be prayed over. So that was really interesting.
Is really anything cool like that anything that you would be open to sharing, or is it more like personal things that
it's? So yeah, I won't go super in detail, but basically we all have close family members who have fallen away. Yeah, we hurts all of us to see that, and we want God to move in that. And so it was interesting to see a number of the people that God told me to pray for were people who were struggling with the same thing. Yeah. And again, I don't know if I'm becoming more, I don't know if God is talking to me more, or if I'm just becoming more sensitive to his instructions or to his voice. But yeah, I've definitely felt more promptings from him lately, and more like go pray for that person than I do normally. It's really cool.
Interesting. Well, yeah. Even today, so for everyone listening, me and Matthew had a meeting right before this. We're doing our coaching program together, and part of it is doing these breathing techniques that kind of calm down your nervous system so that you can get that feeling of like stress or just all those rambunctious thoughts out of your head, and really just like center down, ground down, open yourself back up to hearing the Spirit. And so we do these techniques at the very beginning of the calls every time, just to like, I don't know, get grounded and just get ready for the call, make it the most effective we can. And part of it is like trying to purposely feel positive emotions. So it's like, okay, if I'm going to do a call, maybe I want to feel just like clarity or whatever. So like I'll focus on that and like I'll do my coaching on the call and it's whatever. But this time, and I was telling Matthew this on the call, was that we did this and I had this feeling or like prompting that instead of focusing on feelings like being calm or like excitement or kind of these generic things, I really had this hit in my spirit of like, you need to focus on being receptive. And that was so interesting to me because I've never felt that way before. That's not something that I'm consciously like, oh yeah, I want to do this today. But it was almost like the spirit was notifying me, like preparing me for this podcast, that like, this is something I don't know about, something that I've never experienced. And like, God is trying to communicate something with everybody clearly. And like, I personally, but also I think people just in general need to be more receptive. And it sounds like since you've been to this, maybe that's kind of what's happening to you too.
Yeah. I definitely more receptive to like not only hearing God in the moment, but also like opening my eyes more to his power and to what he can do. Because it's like, you're told, oh, he's all powerful, he can do everything. And it's like, yeah, you believe that. But then what are the actual like nitty gritty implications of that? Like those are two very different things. And he's been showing me more of that lately. And like another thing that I've noticed has changed in me since going is he's really been emphasizing and reinforcing like my identity in him. Like, you are a child, you are my child, you are my friend, you are, my family, you are a prince, you are royalty, you are you are part of this kingdom, you are part of this family. And pretty much immediately after affirming all those things in me and making sure that like I understand those things, then he would turn around and say, and everyone else is like that too. All of these other people, even the people that annoy you, even the people that you don't know very well, is the exact same way. I love them just as much, and they are just as much mine as you are.
And it's so interesting thinking about that, like how big identity is in all of this. And hearing you say like it was geared toward Gen Z. Gen Z was the people being let into the building. Like it is this huge thing happening with the younger generation where I think Gen Z more than anyone, their whole life is centered around their identity, and there's so many people being convinced from TV shows and music and media that your identity is everything. And it's like turning into these identity politics where like you identifying as a certain gender is everything. You identifying as a certain sexuality is everything. And people start to base their whole lives around this. And then for God to be grabbing people up and be like, no, that's not your identity whatsoever. Yeah. You can't find yourself in those things. Mm-hmm. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's so cool. And another thing I forgot to talk about that really like elevated my respect and my like convinced me of its authenticity of the revival was the fact that they turned down a lot of people. Like there were celebrity pastors that were like, hey, this is really cool, like we'll totally speak here. Or like Hillsong offered to, hey, we can lead worship. And they were like, no, like, that this is cool, and we appreciate it, but like this is a student-led thing. We want this to be a local thing. God is working through the students, and we want to continue that. And on top of that, like they could have very easily commercialized it. Like, oh, Asbury, the place where the revival happened. Like, get this T-shirt. Like, oh, look at us, we're so cool. Let's, They didn't do any of that. They just sat back and like let the Spirit lead, and let the Spirit lead through the students. And that was it. There wasn't commercialization happening. There wasn't, oh, featuring this celebrity pastor. It was just letting the Spirit move and letting him do what he wanted to do with it. And that really that was really refreshing.
So what would you say was like the most impactful part of it for you?
Probably just seeing him so present in my generation. The people that I've been like the most skeptical towards are now some of the people who I've seen God in the most. And, there's always been like, I have friends my age who are, definitely spirit led, but it's like, okay, well, those are my friends, that's like 5 of us, and there's, millions of Gen Z people. So like, where that's not exactly an accurate sample size. But this was, a few thousand people all doing the same thing. And it's like, okay, all right, there's something here. There's some significance to that.
Yeah. And it's really powerful too, because when people think about Gen Z, it's like we have given them, like all the generations preceding them have given them the worst lot possible. And then we look at Gen Z struggling with what we've given them, and then we just like crap on them because of it, like blaming them for their circumstances that we've created. And so, it is like a revival. They're being revived.
Yeah.
It's like a redemption.
Yeah, God's going to use us, and I'm really excited to see what he does.
Right. And how do you feel like your life has been changed or is changing since you've been able to experience this?
Yeah, so I feel, like I've said, more in tune with the Spirit, more sensitive to his commands, and more hopeful, more open to a brighter future. And I think all of those attitude shifts are going to make me more receptive to what God wants to do with me in the future. And especially there's always some sort of fire burning in me for God, but like since then it's been burning brighter than ever before, and it's just continuing that and stewarding that flame has become like a big priority for me. And for a long time I felt God calling me into a position of leadership, and now I feel even more determined to lead effectively and to do what needs to be done, not necessarily to replicate Asbury everywhere, but to steward this revival that's happening and to best get more people crazy for Jesus.
Right. And speaking of just the crazy timing of everything, so for my audience, I've already mentioned we're working together through this program that I have. I think the last time we met was like probably like mid 2022. Like
something like that, yeah.
It's been a while. It's
been
a freaking while. And we just met again today for the first time in months. And the crazy thing is that like from this part going forward in the program, it's basically all about stewarding your thing. Like you're mentioning, like you have this fire now, you are excited to bring it forward, you're being called to leadership. And it just so happens that right now in the program is when you're having to look at those things and take those things apart, or like put your different gifts, callings, passions together and start actually creating an action plan going forward. Mm-hmm. And like just hearing this whole thing, I'm like, there's absolutely no coincidence that we just happened to do this meeting today on the day we're recording this podcast. And like, that's exactly what it's leading into, of like, how are you going to go forward from here?
Oh yeah, that's so cool.
So like, on that, where do you think this might take you? Like, do you have ideas? Where do you feel like God is leading you?
Yeah, so I felt this for a while, and I don't know exactly how the change from Asbury is going to impact this, although I'm sure it will. There's probably some sort of subtle butterfly effect that God is doing that I am completely oblivious to. But so I've always kind of felt like a bit of an outcast, and I'm very okay with that. I've born with a disability. My interests have been kind of, not like most mainstream stuff. Like a lot of mainstream stuff, I'm like, even like, oh, that's popular, I don't like it because that's popular, which is kind of stupid, but like I do kind of lean that way sometimes. And then like my music taste, like I'm super into metal music, which most people don't like my band shirt, Impending Doom, which to someone who's not familiar with metal, I could tell if someone like, oh, that's satanic, why are you wearing that? This is a Christian metal band, they're really cool, look them up. But just my music taste, very opposite to like most people, and just I'm not a normal person, and I'm okay with that. And God calls us to be in the world, not of the world, and So I'm okay with being different. But I know a lot of other people who don't feel that way, and a lot of other people who are outcasts and they feel alone and they feel like they have no one, and they feel rejected by the church because, oh, why are you wearing that shirt to church? What do you like? Why do you listen to that screamy music? Or why do you like this stuff? Like that's not, and just making these terrible judgments about their character because they're not into whatever the culture is into. And
Right.
so they hate the church, they hate everyone, they hate society, and they're just living in the state of isolation. And I I really have a heart for those people, and I don't know exactly what this is going to look like, but I really feel God calling me to build some sort of community under Jesus for people who feel like outcasts. Like, hey, I get it, I'm one of you. This is real. Like come here. There's community here. There's family here. Like you can find connection here. Jesus came for the outcast. He's not just for the white robe preacher that's like, in the fancy church building. Like, no, this is for us too. And let's build a family here. Let's build a community. And how that'll happen, what that'll look like, I have no idea. God hasn't shown me yet. But I know he's going to use my voice, my people skills, my just desire to connect with people, hear people, public speaking, preaching, things like that. He'll use those skills in some way. How exactly, I don't know yet. We haven't got there yet, but I'm excited to see what happens.
What you're saying about the churchianity, even me, like, I don't know what it is, but like you always hear and the stereotypes about Christians and like they're so condescending and judgmental, and it's just like so weird because obviously the gospel is like we are sinners, we are imperfect, like we are made perfect through Christ, and like that's the only way, and like besides that we're sinners, and like that's just the way it's gonna be. But there are these people in the church and the people who were criticizing the revival happening of like there were gay people there so it's not a real revival, or like just things like that. And it's like there are people who are different. Like there's so many things that can make you different and make you feel alone and make you feel isolated. And for Christians, like I hope people listening to this can really take this to heart of like your job is not to be judging other people and like telling other people, especially baby Christians, like people who are just dipping their toes into the faith and like starting to get used to it, starting to understand who Jesus is, and like getting rid of all this religious programming. The last thing they need is for people who are proclaiming themselves to be Christian to be like, you can't wear that shirt, that's a metal band, So I think that there is a really big place for what you want to do in the current modern church, because like just even the social media around the Asbury Revival, there are people who are so judgmental and condescending and critical and just negative, and I think that they're sowing a lot of confusion in people who are already Christian and people who are just barely being born again, people who are like 3 years in, like me, where it's like you start to discount some of these things that God is doing, and it's his own people that are making it that way.
Yeah, and I want to talk about just how that happens is, a lot of people, they take something from the Bible and they'll take it out of context, and they take it to mean something way more than what the original meaning was. And so, there's the spirit of the law, there's the spirit of what's being said, and then you can take the words and then just ramp it up to the extreme. And so there's biblical precedent for that. There's biblical precedent for testing the spirits, seeing if something is actually from God or if it's not. And those are real good things. But when all you do is say, oh, this, I'm going to point out all of the flaws and everything that's wrong with it, and because there's just this little tiny thing I don't like, well, then it's not from God, and I'm going to be super harsh and critical about it and not loving it all, you're twisting it. You're taking the good thing and you're ramping it up into something. You're doing what the Pharisees and the Sadducees did to Jesus. They took the law, they took the good thing, and they just built up their own traditions on it, and they twisted it into something that it wasn't.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, I've been watching Queer Eye. Have you ever watched that? okay, it's this show, it's these 5 gay guys that basically go into people's lives that like really need help, and they like transform their style and like their house and like just help them kind of get their lives together. But one of them was, they went to this Christian woman, and this Christian woman has a gay son. And it was so interesting to see in this episode, like, the way that this little town they had to go to was very, it's a Christian tiny town. I think there's like 80 people in it or something. Yeah, very tiny, very, very like Christian. And they, like, these gay guys, you know, came in, that it's like these older generation that live in the town, and they're like not accepting of these guys, where these guys come in and they built like a new community center for the church in the town. And it was so funny watching it, like how ironic it is that like these people have been praying for a community center for so long, and what do you know, it's 5 gay guys that come in and build it for you. And so the woman is in church like preaching, saying like there's people here who say that you can't love gay people, or like you're wrong for being gay, but like how can I say I love God and then not love these people?
Yeah.
And that's a lot of what I see of like, you're a sinner, I can't love you. And it's like, no. Hate the sin, love the sinner. Like, you're getting it backwards, and you're giving Christianity a bad rap. Like, that's why people don't like Christians and Christianity. Like, you're turning people away from God by acting that way.
Exactly. Yeah, we're all sinners. We all sin. So who are we to judge someone for sinning in a different way than we do? Like, it's stupid.
Totally. Yeah, so going from the revival to now being back home and just like projecting these hopes into the future, what is your hope for, you know, Asbury? What's your hope for America, or what's your hope for even the world at large going forward from here?
I mean, I'm trying to think of specifics. The only thing I can really think of is that God's will be done, because I don't know what this is going to look like. I don't know how much of this was, how many of the people that came was legitimate repentance, and how much of it was emotionalism. But we also serve a God who can do literally anything. And so, you know, I'm not going to say, oh, he's going to do this, he's going to do that. He's going to do some great stuff through this. And we are going to see the fruits of this in the years to come, for sure. And Gen Z is going to be used in amazing ways. You know, there's this one movement, there's this page I follow called Gen Z for Jesus, and they're really cool. And one of their things is, like, one of their, I guess, mission statements or movements or whatever you want to call it, is Gen Z will be suicide free. And
wow,
I think that's really cool, really powerful. And for a long time I was like, that is awesome, I love that, I'm all for that, but like I don't think that's actually going to happen. But again, after this, I don't know, man. I think there's definitely some real potential for that. And so God is going to use us in some way to change America, to change the world. I think especially with a lot of the things that is wrong with the modern church today. You know, I don't mean the genuine Christ following church. I do not mean, you know, the actual body of Christ. I mean the church that we see in the mainstream, that, you know, gives Christianity the bad rep, that does all of this stuff, that, you know, twists Christianity too far one way or the other. But we're going to see, I think, just more people genuinely experiencing who Jesus actually is, not who people like to characterize him as.
And I want to like put a call out for people who are listening to this, because my audience is usually like 20 up to like 35, maybe 40. But I think most of us are millennials. And so I just want to put this call out to millennials that this is something that Gen Z is actually going through. And like, I think that we can hold judgment for the younger generations. And I just want people to release that and start to find opportunities to act as mentors for them. Like, give Gen Z a hand to hold. Like, kneel so they can step up. If that makes sense. Like, they've already got so much working against them. The last thing they need is to be like ignored by older believers, if that makes sense. So yeah, just as a millennial, like, don't be so self-centered. Give love to Gen Z. Don't just hate on them because they think differently. Like, they have to go through issues that even millennials haven't had to go through. And it's different and it's hard. And like you said, the suicide thing, I think that a lot of Gen Z is going through so many just issues and like the world events, all the chaos. They are traumatized as a generation. So just, yeah, keep your hearts open and hold love for them. And yeah, I think that's pretty much the most that we can do. Like, really give them the opportunity to stand up and shine the way that God is intending them to.
And we need mentors. We need people to stand up and say what's actually true in a loving way, not in a judgmental way. And
Yeah.
a lot of us are lost. A lot of us don't know the truth. And there are those of us who will close up our hearts and not listen to the truth. The Bible talks about that. But there are some of us who are willing, who just haven't heard. And so also I would encourage everyone to just be bold and let God speak through you, and don't let fear hold you back. Don't let fear of cancellation or judgment or rejection or whatever hold you back, because you're following God. He's got all that planned out. He's not going to let anything happen that isn't supposed to happen. And so don't be afraid of like what you see as a negative outcome, because God had you do that thing for a reason, and it may be not at all the reaction that you were thinking, right? Like when Joseph was getting the dreams of, oh, I'm going to be ruling over my brothers, I doubt he had in his mind, oh, I'm going to be falsely accused of rape and thrown in prison for 8 years to be part of that, So God uses interesting circumstances to get us where he wants us. And so don't be afraid to step out and do what you feel like he's telling you to do.
So cool. Well, yeah, thanks so much for coming on and telling your experience. Do you have any last words, I guess? Last words of wisdom for the podcast?
Yeah. Well, thank you for having me. This has been such a pleasure. I'm really glad we got to do this. I would say just keep going, keep seeking God. If you're a Gen Z watching this like me, see what's happening at the different revivals that have been just going around. And don't ask yourself, how can I replicate this here? But ask yourself, how do I steward the spirit that's happening? How do I use what God is using where I am? How can God use me? He can use you in amazing ways. And so, yeah, just come to him and be open to anything, because God has some ideas that you would never even think of.
Totally. And yeah, while we're talking about it, I have wanted a mentor my entire life, and it's never been something that I've gotten. And so pretty much this whole business, the podcast, the coaching, the courses, everything that I do is my attempt to help mentor people who need a mentor, like basically being the person for other people that I always wished that I had. So if you are looking for a mentorship, like I do feel like that is a large part of my calling and my purpose here, is I want to help guide other people so that you don't have to go through all the struggle and confusion that I did. Like, I want to help fast forward you through a lot of that pain and grief and confusion so that you can do what you feel like you're called to do, so that you can live a life that's fulfilling and has a deeper purpose. Because yeah, we're not meant to be in this world. Well, in this world, but not of this world. So yeah, it's taken me a long time to figure that out and to get there and to kind of plant my way forward. So I am here. My DMs are open if you need to talk, if you have questions, anything. So don't be afraid to reach out to me. Don't be afraid to reach out to Matthew. Obviously, he's got a leadership call on his heart too. So yeah, if you feel called, don't discount it. Don't deny it. Don't ignore it. Just act on it, because you never know what'll happen.
Yeah, totally. And like she said, yeah, I'm also, DMs are open. Instagram is at thereaper.vi. And, it's a lot of metal stuff, a lot of music stuff, but there's some Jesus stuff too. And I'm open to talking. I want to hear your stories. I want to hear what you're going through, and I want to help. So same here.
Cool. And I will link your Instagram in like the podcast or YouTube show notes also.
Cool.
So yeah, for anyone who wants to find his podcast, you can find it in the description. And yeah, is there anything else?
No, that's it. That's all I can think of.
Cool. Okay, well, this was awesome. Thanks so much for kind of educating us on revivals and the history of, you know, what's happened, what they mean. It's really enlightening to hear your experience because, again, from what I'm seeing on social media, some people say it's awesome, and some people have been saying, like, this is a satanic deception to sell the Jesus Revolution movie, so don't listen to anything coming out of Asbury. So, yeah, it's been nice to kind of get that clarification from someone who was actually there and actually experienced it. And yeah, I'm just grateful to have you on here, and I hope that, again, this does reach a lot of people.
Yeah, me too. Thank you.
Okay. Well, cool. Thanks for listening, guys. I will see you on the next episode. And until then, our DMs are open. God be with you. Bye, guys.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Final Wake Up. I hope this episode sparked a flame in you to march forward in your journey for truth, health, happiness, and meaning. If you want to dive even deeper down the rabbit hole, go to my Instagram at madison.polika. There I have so many highlights dedicated to spreading even more information and value. You can also join the club with my email list, linked in my bio, to stay up to date on all the latest news, sales, and new offerings. Or if you want to talk to me personally, please send me a DM. I would love to hear from you. If you love this episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave an amazing review. Bonus points if you share this to your story and write what you learned. Tag me in it so that I can connect and see how this has actually helped you. If you know somebody who would really appreciate this, or somebody who desperately needs to hear what I talked about in this episode, please send this to them. Together, we can bring light to this world full of confusion and help people thrive. Thank you, and see you next time.